Story number 1. The villain in a best-selling novel. 12 years ago, I was an eager intern at one of the most prestigious companies in New York City. It was the kind of place that attracted the best and brightest, ambitious, intelligent young professionals, all looking to climb the corporate ladder. Securing a spot there was no small feat, and I was determined to make the most of it. At the time, I was in a long-distance relationship with my girlfriend, who is now my wife and the mother of our 2 children. Among the interns, there was one girl I connected with almost immediately. We had a great dynamic, talking about books, career ambitions, and life in general. We often grabbed lunch together and exchanged thoughts about the future, navigating the fast-paced corporate world. It was easy, effortless. From my perspective, it was a purely platonic friendship. There was no flirting, no ulterior motive, just mutual respect and shared interests. One evening, a group of us decided to go to our usual after-work bar for happy hour. It had become a tradition, unwinding after a long day, venting about our bosses, and laughing about office politics. That night was no different. We were all enjoying ourselves, drinks flowing, conversations overlapping. At some point, she and I drifted away from the group, engaged in one of our usual deep discussions. Then, out of nowhere, she leaned in and tried to kiss me. For a split second, I froze. A part of me, maybe the part influenced by alcohol or the thrill of the moment, almost went along with it. But then, like a lightning strike, my girlfriend's face flashed in my mind. That moment of clarity pulled me back to reality. I instinctively stepped away. The atmosphere shifted instantly. The laughter, the warmth, it all evaporated. She gave a nervous chuckle, brushing it off like it was nothing, but I could tell she was embarrassed. After that night, everything between us changed. She became distant, cold. The effortless conversations were gone. Soon, she started making snide remarks in group settings, small digs at first, then more pointed. It became clear that she wanted nothing to do with me. By the time our internship ended, we barely spoke. Then, she returned to her home country, blocking me on Facebook before I even had a chance to process it. That was the last I heard of her. Or so I thought. Fast forward to 2 weeks ago. I was casually scrolling through Twitter/X when I came across an article from a well-known newspaper. The headline caught my eye, but what made my heart skip a beat was the photo attached to it. It was her. The article detailed her rise in the literary world. She had become a highly successful author, published multiple books, and even won prestigious awards. Out of curiosity, I looked up her work. One book, in particular, stood out. The cover had a distinct New York theme, and the description mentioned a young writer working at a prestigious company in NYC. Something about it made my stomach twist. I decided to buy the book on my iPad. Big mistake. By the 3rd page, she introduced a character, a terrible, self-absorbed man. At first, I didn't think much of it, but as I kept reading, I started feeling uneasy. This character had my exact haircut, my fashion style, and, most disturbingly, came from the same obscure city as me. Then, on page 4, she dropped my name, my full name, and my name isn't common. I kept reading, my hands gripping the edges of my iPad tighter with every page. In her story, I wasn't just a side character. I was the antagonist, the villain, and not just any villain, the absolute worst person in the protagonist's life. She had taken every moment of our internship, every interaction, and twisted them beyond recognition. In her version, I was a manipulative, deceitful person who played with her emotions, led her on, and ultimately betrayed her. She painted me as someone who crushed her dreams, humiliated her, and left emotional destruction in my wake. She even implied that my rejection had sent her spiraling into self-doubt, nearly destroying her ambition. By the time I finished the book, I just sat there in shock. I had no idea how to react. On one hand, I had apparently made such an impression on her that she felt the need to immortalize me in print. But on the other hand, what the hell? Story number 2, my boyfriend's brother might be a Kevin. I'm not sure if this belongs here, but every time I hear stories about my boyfriend's brother Kevin, I can't help but think of all the Kevin stories I've read. He's not a bad guy, just odd in ways that make you question his thought process. So, the other day, Kevin left his wallet at work. No big deal, right? It happens to everyone at some point. The problem was, when he got home and realized it was missing, he also had no gas in his car. A normal person would handle this situation in a logical way. Maybe call a coworker, ask his grandparents, who lived just a block away, for a small loan, or even just put in a couple of dollars worth of gas to make it there and back. But no, not Kevin. Instead, he decided to go on a mission to find money inside the house. He started searching through drawers, checking under couch cushions. And then, as if struck by genius, he walked into my boyfriend Nick's room and spotted a jar of coins sitting on his dresser. Now, Nick had been collecting this loose change for months, planning to eventually cash it in. Most people would maybe take a few dollars worth, just enough to cover gas, but Kevin? Nope. He grabbed the whole thing. And we're not talking about just a handful of change. This was $45 in dimes, nickels, and quarters. Imagine stuffing your pockets full of coins like some medieval treasure hoarder. Instead of taking just what he needed, he loaded up all of it, as if he were setting out on some great adventure. But his master plan didn't end there. Instead of going straight to the gas station and putting in just enough fuel to get to work and back, Kevin first drove to a coin cashing machine. He stood there for who knows how long, feeding coins into the machine, turning his pocket full of metal into crisp bills. Once he had his $45 in cash, he finally went to get gas. With a full tank, he drove back to his workplace, got his wallet, and then, because his logic knows no bounds, immediately went to the bank to withdraw another $45 worth of coins so he could pay Nick back exactly what he took. When he got home, he proudly handed Nick the fresh rolls of coins, expecting some sort of gratitude. Nick, understandably, was just completely baffled. "Why would I want coins back?" he asked, staring at the rolls in disbelief. Kevin, as if this was the most normal thing in the world, shrugged and said, "Well, I took coins, so I'm giving you back coins." Nick tried to explain that the whole point of collecting the change was to eventually turn it into paper money, not to have it returned in the exact form it was taken. But Kevin just stood there, completely convinced that his method was foolproof. And it gets better. Instead of simply dumping the rolls of coins back into the jar, Kevin took things a step further. He walked over to the kitchen table, unwrapped every single roll, and made a giant pile of coins. Then, instead of just pouring them back into the jar, he started grabbing them by the handful, dramatically dropping them in one by one as if he were some sort of pirate counting his treasure. Nick just stood there, staring, shaking his head. He knew better than to argue at this point. Kevin, on the other hand, was completely satisfied with how things turned out. This is just one example of the way Kevin operates. He's a perfectly normal guy, until you see him turn the simplest tasks into the most needlessly complicated processes imaginable. And in his mind, it all makes perfect sense. Story number 3. I dated my teacher, and it was the most beautiful relationship I've ever had, but at the same time, I can hardly talk to anyone about it. This is a bit of a long anecdote. I was in my last year of high school and had been searching for a meaningful relationship for a long time. I truly believe that movies, TV shows, and other media portraying teenage romances can be misleading and even harmful. I had problems trying to date a girl who, looking back, never really appreciated what I did for her. I tried everything to make her happy, but I was never enough. No matter how much effort I put in. She would even tell me how she was interested in another guy. Despite having many female friends, I kept looking for that special connection with someone. After the Christmas break, I noticed a new girl at school who wasn't wearing a uniform. I thought maybe she was new and hadn't bought it yet. But then I was shocked to realize that this girl, who looked my age, I was 18 at the time, was actually my teacher. Of course, she wasn't 18, she was 28. I have to admit, she seemed quite inexperienced. She introduced herself and started teaching multiple classes. While many students found her lessons boring or had negative things to say about her, I couldn't help but watch her, completely ignoring what others thought. I always got along well with teachers. I tend to connect better with adults than with people my age. I liked joking around with them and greeting them, and while I had my favorites, I enjoyed their company in general. I even played Uno with some of them during breaks, which helped me get closer to this teacher. She was very friendly and even started joking with me. One day, she mentioned that she liked walking around the city, which immediately caught my attention because walking around the city is my favorite hobby. Over time, I started thinking about inviting her for a walk, but I hesitated. Finally, during a 2-week vacation, I saw my chance and approached her. "Miss, you mentioned that you like walking around the city. Would you like to go for a walk sometime?" To my surprise, she said yes. That day, I was incredibly happy. I started doubting, thinking maybe she had just agreed to be polite, but then she found me on Instagram and confirmed our plan. I'll try to keep this part short. In the end, she accepted. We went out, talked, joked around, and everything went great. I asked her if we could go out again, but since school was starting soon, it would take some time. However, she started allowing me to walk her to her metro station. Day after day, I walked her there until, a few weeks later, I asked if she wanted to go for a walk on a Friday, and she agreed. That was the moment everything changed. The day was as fun and relaxed as always. We exchanged some playful, slightly bold jokes. Then, we went for pizza, and she asked me to sit next to her. I was nervous, but I thought she just wanted to talk. While waiting for the pizza, between playful touches and laughter, we shared our first kiss. As we left, we both wondered how we would handle this situation. We both felt like we wanted to see where it would go. From that day on, I wasn't just walking her to the metro station anymore. Now she stayed with me a little longer. We talked, hugged, kissed, and eventually things became more intimate. As you can imagine, we couldn't tell anyone about this. In class, we were nothing more than student and teacher. I kept joking with her, and sometimes I even wrote her little notes in my notebook, but we were always extremely careful. She was everything I had been searching for. I loved everything about her sense of humor, the way she was sometimes playful, sometimes bold, sometimes affectionate. At the same time, she could be distant and cold, but I tried to understand because I knew our relationship couldn't last forever. I had always known. I knew that if she ever decided to end things, I would have to accept it, whether because of the age difference or simply because she was my teacher. Still, I enjoyed every moment with her. To me, she was beautiful. She didn't like me saying that, but what captivated me the most were her eyes. She wore glasses, but her gaze, her shy little smile, her voice, everything about her fascinated me. That was how things were until high school finally ended. It might seem like we would have more freedom after that, but at the same time, she became busier. She stopped texting me as much, started declining more plans. On one of our last outings, I noticed she was more distant. We talked about it. She admitted she could be cold and said she should try to be more affectionate, but I told her she didn't have to change. There was nothing wrong with who she was. We both knew we didn't have much time left together. We cried a little, and it was a beautiful moment. That night, we walked in the rain. I bought her a pastry, we jumped over puddles and got a little lost in the city. Eventually, her birthday was approaching, and I wanted to get her something special. I searched for the perfect gift, bought it, and prepared a small bag with a few thoughtful details. That day was chaotic, and I ended up arriving late. She joked that she had already left, but she was just messing with me. We had a nice afternoon together. She showed me a few places, and I tried to give her an early birthday celebration. Everything seemed perfect. Or so I thought. I texted her that night, but she didn't reply. At first, I didn't think much of it. She often took time to respond. But then 2 weeks passed. Then 3. Then a month. Then a month and a half. I sent her a message saying that if she no longer wanted to talk to me, she just had to tell me. But she never did. I was worried. I was sad, but I couldn't talk to anyone about it. I kept wondering, what if something happened to her? What if she lost my contact? What if she's trying to find me? I started college, and the months went by, and I simply had to accept that I would never get a response. The most beautiful relationship I had ever had, with the most special person I had ever met, and I never even got to say goodbye. I had to move on in silence. Only a few people knew about this, and even they found it hard to believe. I don't blame them. It's still unbelievable to me, too. I'm writing this today because, just recently, she finally responded to my message. She told me she was okay, that she had been very busy and thinking a lot about how to reply, but that it was best for everything to end. She thanked me, and that was her goodbye. I had already said my own goodbye earlier. On Christmas, I sent her a message, telling her I didn't like how things had ended, and that, even if she never read it, I just wanted to say farewell. So when I read her message yesterday, all I felt was happiness, knowing she was okay. A small part of my heart wished she would magically ask me to go out again, but I know the best thing to do is cherish what we had, learn from it, and move forward. So the only thing I replied was, "Thank you. That's all I needed. Thanks again for everything." And well, that's my story. Story number 4. When Santa gave me a flat tire for Christmas. Santa gave me a flat tire for Christmas. I'm sure he didn't mean to. He probably looked at our steep driveway and, wisely, decided to park at the top of the hill. I do. Rudolph and Dancer were likely chomping at the bit to leave in the bitter cold that swept the country. Just because they're used to the Arctic doesn't mean they like it. A clip of an impatient hoof, and boom, flat tire. Either that, or I had a slow leak. The tire I noticed was low. Friday night was on its way out. But I preferred the reindeer theory. Not much I could do about it over Christmas, nor did I care. I was home warm and cozy. The Christmas lights were off. Baking postponed at the request of an electric company, fine with me cuddling my cats and listening to carols, as long as I didn't stress the power grid. I'm blessed with a family willing to postpone Christmas to Boxing Day. Flat tire? No big deal. The modern world of flat tires. Did you know the world of flat tires has changed? There are apps now. You can schedule your tow and mechanic days in advance, even on Christmas. Bet you didn't know that. Bet you're from my time when you, in heels, haul a spare tire out of the trunk, scrape your knuckles on the crappy jack, and swear at lug nuts tightened by a bear. I've done it. Many times. That's why I was smug about paying $15 for roadside service. But those modern folks, those millennials and Gen Z kids, were already on it. By the time I called Monday, they had filled all the appointments. The earliest I could get a tire patched? Spring. Okay. Tuesday. But still, choosing the wrong shop. I had two choices. Company 1. Honest up front, warned of a 2.5-hour wait. Company 2. Promised me unicorns, pandas, and a 1 p.m. appointment. I like unicorns. I went with Company 2. First sign of trouble? The guy at the desk greeted me with, "Drop off only. We'll have you done by 8. No warning. No remorse. Just vibes. Too late to switch." Those Gen Z kids had probably booked Company 1 until next winter. I left my car, spent hours browsing a craft store, and got a ride home. At 6 p.m., they finally called. Bad news. We can't patch the tire. Your tread is too low. Also, we don't have your size in stock. A standard Honda tire. I checked Company 1 online. They had it. So did every big box store. But Company 2 had to order it. Earliest arrival? Thursday. My frozen groceries, sitting in the car since the weekend, were now in much warmer weather. Out of pity and self-preservation, Company 2 ordered me a ride to pick up my chicken. I let them assume I got the flat in the middle of a grocery run. The mechanic who saw the tiny pinprick of a slow leak wasn't fooled. The final straw. I called Wednesday morning. Call back at 1 p.m. to be sure the tire arrived, the smooth-voiced rep said. I didn't believe him. I called at 12:42 p.m. Good news. The tire was in. Bad news. They wouldn't install it until 5 or 6 p.m. By now I was annoyed. I am a patient customer. I joke with staff, make small talk, browse stores while I wait. But this tested me. At 6 p.m. I walked in. The night shift guy, with the same irritated attitude as before, looked me dead in the eye and said, "Your car is going to be last." Even a Buddhist monk would have snapped. I stormed off to the craft store again. When I returned, a customer recognized me. "Weren't you just here for a tire?" He laughed. Company 1 started glowing in my mind like the pearly gates of heaven. The root of the problem. Here's the thing. A mechanic friend once told me how to run an efficient auto shop. The front desk controls the job tickets. They know who needs rentals, who's a long-term customer, who needs their car back ASAP. They stay in constant communication with the mechanics. They keep customers informed. Company 1 does this. Company 2 does not. At Company 2, the front desk guy immediately handed off job tickets to mechanics and lost all control. He had no idea where keys were. No control over the work queue. He just stood there, taking the heat from frustrated customers while mechanics did whatever they wanted. That's why I waited 36 hours for a 30-minute job. The end. At last, they handed me my keys. I paid my $107.05 bill, thanked them, got in my car, and never looked back. Next time, I'm picking Company 1.